Hello, one and all, and welcome to another Jim's Monday Malt Samples. Good evening. Good to see you again. I hope you can all hear me and see me well. It is another Monday night, Jim's Monday Malt Samples, and tonight we have a guest. I'm not alone tonight, and you might know this man, you might not. What I will say is, well, I'll introduce him in a moment. First of all, I want to dive into the chat just and say hello to a few people because there's been a few people hanging around. Menno's multi mission spoke in earlier. He isn't going to make it tonight, but he did say hello. Greg, good to see you, my friend. Mark Slinger, Sam Clark, Billy Saunders, Steve Anderson, Radek, good to see you. Pete Head, Lee J. Brown. Did I miss anybody? Billy Saunders. I think I've got Peter Boxes in. Good to see you all, guys. Yes, Graham Horner. Hello, Steve Whiskey Breyer. Room filling up well tonight. So, yes, tonight I have my first guest, and he, as I said, if you were watching Roy's feed last Sunday night, us Northern Irish guys took part in a little thing. We stuffed it, but we'll not mention any of that. And this man, Phil, was there. Phil, indeed, and Causeway Coast Reviews, or Malt Review, Malt Official. You would know him from all of these things. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome Phil.
Good evening, Phil. How's it going? You all right?
Very best, my friend. Very best.
Good. Sláinte.
So we are Phil and I are going to dip into some. It's a Norn Irish night, as we would call it here in Norn Iron, and we're going to dip into. We're starting off just to get us going with a little Bushmills 10-year-old.
Yes, I've actually finished mine, so I'm going to top it up again a wee bit. So,
well,
that maybe says something more about me than about you. Fair play.
So, Phil.
Yep.
Causeway Coast Reviews came first, I take it. And then now, sorry, there's something else I wanted to mention before we go any further. Yeah. You get the tag, the label of being grumpy, and I know you personally, and I know that you're not grumpy. And I've discussed this with other people. It's not grumpy. People are mistaking grumpiness with honesty. Is the way I've always looked at it.
Yeah. It is one of those things. Like, I suppose as I have in my bio for Malt Review, I'm fairly opinionated about like whiskey, and I make no apologies about not being behind the door about whether I like something or whether I don't. And at the end of the day, it's only my personal preference. It's only my opinion. Mm-hmm. I'm not putting myself up there as being like the law or anything like that. But like some people just don't like
honesty
to hear things being called out, or I know in malt we get sometimes labeled as being maybe too critical, as being brutal, but like that's.
I actually, I appreciate it, and that you're another one of those people, and I think I maybe told you this over a distillery launch last year that I put up there for that reason. There's whiskey reviewers that I'll always turn to and turn to their opinion because you're honest,
No, thank you.
There is no BS. So may as well give it straight. So the Malt Official, Malt Review, whatever, malt basically, they picked you up. How did that gig come about?
Yeah, so like, I mean, the whole thing. To be honest, sometimes I still sort of feel a bit like, how did that happen? To be quite honest, but basically, it was actually a friend of mine, friend Paddy Doherty, and he was on at me about why don't you start doing a whiskey blog?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I had followed the likes of Mark Newton, who was Malt Review. I've followed JJ, who was Whiskey Rover. I had always been sort of felt aligned to them because they were kind of very sharp shooting, and they were just, they were informative, but you could tell that these guys were just, speaking from the heart and whatever.
Yeah.
So one of the things that got me into it was I bought a bottle of Bowmore Black Rock,
Mm-hmm.
and I bought it off the recommendations of other whiskey bloggers,
Right.
and it was atrocious. Like, it is just the most hateful stuff, and I just couldn't believe that, like, people were like really bigging this stuff up,
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned this to my friend Paddy, and he was just like, well, like, if that's how you feel, why don't you just start doing a blog, So at the time, I remember actually one of JJ's live streams, and I was like sort of chatting to him, and I was like, look, I'm thinking about doing a whiskey blog. What
Mm-hmm.
do you think? And JJ was like, look, the only advice I would give you is just be honest, and that's it. And I was like, right, fair enough. So started Causeway in 2016, and then sort of about 10 months later, I got a message on Instagram, kind of out of the blue, from JJ saying, would you like to be part of something else? And that was whenever they started this idea of like amalgamating Malt Review and Whiskey Rover into what is now Malt.
Right.
Yeah, and basically, I mean, it was a case that, JJ had said that him and Mark had both been watching like my site, which I found quite astounding.
Mm-hmm.
Saying that, I was getting so little views, really, to be quite honest. And they just said that they appreciated my style of writing, they appreciated the fact that I was honest, and that, I wasn't basically trying to run with the industry or anything like that,
Yeah.
So that was kind of the start of it then.
Well, and it's one of those things that, I mean, so just Menno, who wasn't supposed to be in here tonight, now comes in with us. But I'll give you that, Menno. Oh, sorry, Luna, it's good to see you. But because this was the thing, and now, I mean, if people don't know you or don't know your face, or
Yeah.
can't put in, they'll certainly by now have. Most of us will have read something that you've written, because I mean the millions of people that are viewing Malt now,
Yeah,
it's just rocketed, so it's.
it really has. I mean, it's pretty incredible. I mean, at the end of the day, like, I mean, as Jason would always kind of point out, like, we're not, I mean, we're given free rein to write about what we want.
Mm-hmm.
And, quite often we're not even writing about new releases. I mean, we could write about something that was released 2 years ago, maybe 3 months ago, or it's just stuff that we picked up, we're interested in. And yet, somehow, just month on month, there's just more and more and more people coming up. And surprisingly, so I've just seen a message there from Jason saying, is there a subtitle option? No, Jason, there isn't.
Turn it up, yeah, turn it up.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I mean, I think that's the thing, is that, people come to Malt because they realize there's going to be a wide variety, especially now that, like, they have went down the road of having things like cider reviews, mezcal, rum.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So that's a pretty big thing now.
Yeah, and as I say, it's taken off, and it's what I like about it is, it's yet again, it's like what reviewers do. The reviewers that I tend to go back to, where there's no specific thing, and you've just mentioned that it's not even just whiskey, as they're bouncing around in other places, and I like the fact that, I mean, yourself, I mean, if Irish whiskey, for example, rung your bell and that was all you like,
Yep.
you wouldn't be involved. that they wouldn't have picked you up because you
Yeah,
have to have that experience to dip your toe here and dip your toe there. Like,
yeah, definitely.
so what
No,
what does ring your bell then?
what does ring my bell?
Mhm. Do you have a specific choice, or are you happy to just sort of float around?
No, I mean, like, I suppose the big thing for me is that I've never really tied myself down to like one region or anything like that. Like, I'm always, to me, like, whiskey's a journey of exploration.
Hmm.
You're constantly trying to broaden your palate and your horizons. So like I'm equally as likely to spend money on world whiskey as to be fair, actually, I'm probably more likely to spend money on whiskey from other parts of the world than Ireland.
Hmm.
To be
Yeah, no, I agree
quite
with you
honest,
there. Like,
you know. I mean, I've never set out to be a cheerleader for Irish whiskey. Um, I never will be, per
hmm.
se. Um, if there's something out there that is genuinely interesting and that I think will put Ireland on the map,
Hmm.
then I'll definitely give it the time of day. Equally, like I mean, um, I know that there's stuff out there that's high volume or whatever, and whether it's the likes of Jameson. I mean, I have been rather unkind to some of the Jamesons out there, even some of the red breasts. I mean, some people can't believe the scores that they've given, like the
Hmm.
likes of the Dreamcast 20, but um, it just didn't hit the mark for me. So
Well, it's yet again, it's honesty. But I'll get back to that. There's a couple of things you mentioned there that I
yeah,
want
okay,
to get back to later. But first of all, I want to get a sample going, if that's all
yep,
right with you.
no
And I
problem.
want to start with the Bushmills 1608.
Yeah,
And I will just pop this up for everyone to see. That's the fella there.
yep,
This was very kindly shared to me from Greg's Whiskey Guide. So cheers, Greg. And the first thing I noticed about this was the color. Now,
yep,
obviously, there's color added, like, but
yes, there
with
definitely is.
but in fairness to them, they have made it a lovely color.
It is.
I think that I generally don't rely on color an awful lot, but
No, I wouldn't myself.
that I just whenever I poured it in the glass, I just thought it was a lovely color.
Yeah,
So you reviewed this a couple of years ago and give it
I
a
did.
7 out of 10.
Yep.
So that obviously is something. There's something in it that you liked.
Yeah. Well, I think to me it's like one of the best releases that has come out of Bushmills in recent times, really.
Hmm.
In no small part, I think, from the fact that it's 46%.
Yeah.
Um, that is my massive thing that just really irks me about Bushmills. I have no issue about like the blends, 40%.
Hmm.
That's fine, absolutely no problem at all. I just think they're hamstringing their single malts by not going at least 46%.
Well,
And
you and I know that, and I mean, there's somebody in the group here tonight, Graham, the guy Whiskey Graham,
yeah,
and he's actually come to calling me Bushy. Simply because I just do this. I just rail on Bushmills all the time because of this 40% thing.
yeah. But I think the other thing is, 30% of the malt that went into this was crystal malt, which
That's
is
right. Yeah, it's beer
more
malt.
typically like used in beer.
Mhm.
So to me, between the 46% between that, there's like a chewy texture to this whiskey that you don't normally get in Bushmills, which I think is kind of sometimes can be, especially at 40%, is very thin.
Yeah,
So there's definitely,
there's an incredibly rich nose on it,
yeah,
and that
uh,
is that. I vaguely remember watching somebody making a beer, making like a homemade beer with crystal
yeah,
malt, and they said it will bring out a natural sweetness,
yeah,
because it's adding to the sugar. But
yeah,
I hear somebody saying uh, about it being that there's almost a coffee thing off it as well. I could be wrong.
Yeah, there is. Well, they say that you sort of get like a lot of like fudge and toffee notes, especially like, and you probably will get a bit of coffee on it. And I think in this as well, you get there's kind of like a new leather kind of element on the nose as well. But the thing that underpins it is that you still get, what I like about it is the fact that you still get, like, there's the Bushmills tropical fruit from the new make underneath it.
Funny, because I'm struggling actually to get. Sorry, I just had to pull that up from Luna there. I can't really answer that on here, Luna. I'm actually struggling to find the standard. Now, I was through something recently and had a nose at the Bushmills new make spirit.
Yeah.
And it surprised me as well that how different it was.
Yeah.
Pre-maturation, I was actually highly surprised. I thought there would have been an awful lot of that fresh fruit, pear, and but yeah, I must admit now, actually having had my nose in the Bushmills 10, it's starting. It's underneath that.
It is.
As you would say, that there is a leathery thing of it, and it's almost underneath that.
Yep.
Lovely nose. I mean, I was, as I say, I would be a bit fussy about about the Bushmills.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's whenever Bushmills released things like this, and even like the Acacia one they released at 47%. It kind of shows you things that they're capable of, and that's why, like, me and you would find it a bit grating that they don't release more things like this.
Well, it's I mean, you're 5 minutes up the road, technically.
Yeah.
And it's from Bushmills Distillery, and I mean, I know people, but because it's been around for so long, I consider it our distillery.
Yeah,
totally. And it's one of those things. Then you just, and I know Greg's, I don't know here, and Greg's a fan, and has been over here, I think, and it's one of those that even the tour, you and I have discussed this before, the tour and everything, it's just such a letdown. And it's those, now I know that you've got the was it the distillery? It's not the Distillery Reserve, it's the
the Acacia, the exclusive.
Yeah, the Acacia one, and that's 43%, is it?
47.
47, right? So you've got something there with a bit of beef about it, but then they put the arm in for it, do they not?
Do you know, it's 75 quid. And
that's not too bad, actually.
It's not too bad for something that's between 10 and 11 years old. It's, considering some of the prices we are paying now for whiskey, it's probably thereabouts.
Yeah.
Admittedly, I would be much happier if it was around 60. But beggars can't be choosers and all the rest of it.
That 12-year-old Distillery Reserve was the one that really opened my eyes, and and the more then I looked into it, as nice as the 10-year-old is, as nice as the 16-year-old is, to bottle them at 40%, I just think is shameful.
Yeah, it is. It is, and one of the things I've been on a lot of Bushmills representatives about has been, why not do the 12-year-old Distillery Reserve as a bottle your own cask strength expression?
Yeah.
Like, I would quite happily probably pay, 100 quid for that, to be able to do that. So maybe I shouldn't be giving them ideas about what to charge here, but I just think that it'd be. I just think the 12-year-old Distillery Reserve is not something that's unique enough.
No.
To take home. And
I certainly get my eyes open there, and it's one that I'll keep going back to every now and again, and just to see if there's anything better about it. But no, I just find it bland. There's something, as I say, even in that, even in the 10-year-old, that's fresh and bright, that isn't there in the 12-year-old. It just But,
well, do you know? It's funny. It's like the Bushmills 16 and 21 are kind of whiskies that divide opinion. A lot of people love the 16. personally, I'm in the 21-year-old camp. I think the 21-year-old is a lovely whiskey, even at 40%. The 16-year-old, you know, I don't know. Somehow, whenever I'm in the distillery, I seem to like it. Right?
Yeah.
Anytime I'm at home, I just think this is like one of the most bland whiskies that I've ever put in my mouth. And for some reason, it just doesn't speak to me. You know what I mean? Whereas the 21-year-old does. But again, like, you know, they both have price rises. I mean, the 16 is like nearly 80 quid a bottle now.
That's ridiculous.
The 21-year-old's like, I think, nearly 160 or something. And by not putting them out at 46%, my thing is, well, there's other options, even in Ireland, that I'm going to go and buy first.
Yeah.
You know?
I totally agree. And I mean, even, and now because those offerings, because the independent bottlers are, the new independent bottlers are picking up Bushmills, the Friend at Hand, places like that, and doing funky things with them. The options there, and I would honestly, I would rather turn around and pay for something that somebody's put out at cask strength. It's still Bushmills, but it's just been treated the same way, really. But they're putting it out at a strength that gives it body, it gives it volume, and I'll pay the same or even less for the thing that Bushmills would be charging.
Yeah. Well, I mean, recently there, like with the help of Jason, I've managed to get 3 of the SMWS Bushmills. One of which, the rather lovely titled Hazelnut Chocolate Dundee Cake, is a double distilled bush. And honestly, like, it's just class. It's really, really, really good. So they are capable of, you know, putting good stuff out there. It's just for some reason they're choosing not to. I think that's the thing as well, is that, you know, even you look down the road at Middleton and you look at like some of the things they're doing, and you know, like bringing out the 27-year-old at cask strength. And okay, it's an arm and a leg, but whatever. It's probably, comparatively speaking, fairly well priced compared to other 25-year-olds that you would get from Scotland and things like that. And yet, like, what's Bushmills doing? They're releasing like Red Bush.
Yeah.
You know?
Even all that steamship stuff and all, there's nothing exciting about that. Like, no,
there's not. I mean, to me, so far, the best steamship that I've tried has been the bourbon, the extra charred bourbon cask. And it's still nothing to really get excited about. I mean, I wouldn't tell anybody to run out and definitely buy it. You know,
I just worry that at some point Bushmills, when all these distilleries are putting out all their own stuff, at some point Bushmills is going to have to do something to continue competing, because the competition's there already.
Yeah.
I know it's one of those things that these people have, you know. This Bushmills 10 that I have, I didn't buy it. A friend of mine bought it to prove to me that Bushmills can do stuff. Because he was a Bushmills fan, and I just kept saying so many bad things about him. He says, "I'll buy you a bottle of 10," and it arrived. He didn't actually tell me this. It arrived at the door, and I couldn't figure out where the hell this had come from. And it was a friend of mine, and I must admit, opened it, tried a glass, quite enjoyed it, and he says, "I told you so." And I must admit, for a wee 40-year or 40%, 10-year-old, okay, and it's not expensive. That's, if you're going to do that, that's what you do. To me, it's whenever, as you say, the end of the 16s, and they're charging twice, nearly 3 times the price for it, and they're still putting it out at 40%. It just no.
And like, I mean, it's interesting if you ever go to the distillery and do like the premium tasting, and you try the whole range, and compare it with a Scotch and a bourbon and all the rest of it. But the two that always actually stick out for me are actually the 10 and the 21. What I like about the 10 actually is that it is kind of, like, to me, it's like a summer whiskey. It's like kind of really light and zesty and citrusy, and it's pretty fresh. So I would be, you know, I kind of quite like it, but again, I think it would be better at 46, just plain and simple.
Sorry, just to answer Sam's question. Isn't the Poke Castle still Bushmills? Is it? It's a bit bush, isn't
Yeah.
it? And
No, it is. It's Bush. So
it's
they,
still all bush.
yeah, so they have obviously must have some sort of sourcing agreement with Bushmills to get their spirit from there. Yeah, but again, they're putting out at 46%, and
yeah. Right. Sorry, we've talked about this long enough, and it's actually getting to the point where it's getting slightly nutty, even a slight hint of paint, emulsion paint.
Well, there's 5% grain in there, so that might be a wee bit of the floral note that you're getting.
Yeah, that's a better palate. That just for that 6%.
Yeah,
a nice bit of roundness. It's nice, and
it has a much better mouthfeel than
normal 40%. It definitely does. And there is a nutty thing in there. It's like walnut. And even got something else there.
So I sort of get like a coffee and walnut cake off it.
And there's even almost a charred thing in there.
Definitely, there's a bit of definitely toasted oak that you're getting off that.
No, that's good.
And then, there's a nice spice to that as well. It's not overpowering, but it just kind of carries the whole thing through in the palate.
If nobody minds, I know Greg's on there watching this because he sent me these samples. I'm going to add a little water to this because I always like just to see what happens.
Yeah, well, my experience with Bushmills is that it's a bit like Gremlins. You don't add water.
You could have stopped me anytime.
Well, I'll follow you here, so. But that's generally because it's already at 40%, and I've just found the stuff at 40% loses all definition and body. I think with a bit of water actually in the nose, it becomes actually a bit more oak driven.
It's certainly an awful lot softer. I would agree that the water hasn't helped. Now, what I will do is I'll let that settle with the water in it.
Yeah, I think that's it's just too much.
Yeah, it's ruined it. For now, as I say, I'll let it sit.
Yeah.
But that's a shame.
Yeah.
Right. Damn it. I'll put a lid on that.
Them's the breaks, huh?
Them's the breaks. Sorry, Greg. Anyway, moving on. So we've already discussed Bushmills. We know what they need to do because I'd actually planned on asking you that. I think we've pretty much nailed it all there. Because, as I said, I think moving forward, Irish whiskey, both you and I have discussed this in the past, that because of these new distilleries, because they're all using somebody else's new make, now is not the time. I actually was talking to someone earlier on, I'm not sure whether they're in here or not, and said to them, I wouldn't buy Irish at the moment, which isn't made by Bushmills, Cooley, or Middleton, for the simple fact that you're just buying it from somebody else, but paying the premium for it, and with the finish on it. So it's just, it seems a bit of a waste of time.
Yeah, well, there is an element of that. Interestingly, the other day, somebody tagged me in something on Twitter, and there was a new blend that came out, Matt Darcy's blend, 10-year-old blend. That made a big deal about the fact that it has some 17-year-old malt in it.
Right.
It's €110 from the Killowen whiskey shop. It's 46%, and you're going right. Well, Hinch do a 10-year-old blend that is very similar and is £50.
Yeah.
And they make no bones about the fact that it's a source whiskey because they're building their distillery at the minute. So €110, you start thinking what? Look at the options that are available to me here.
You see, this is it, and this is something that I've noticed more and more and more, and especially when you're especially when Scotch is open to you, when the world of Scotch whiskey, because there's an awful lot of people I still find, especially in Ireland, and I mean these are people that work, and you actually know some of these people that
Yep.
work in bars and work in whiskey shops, etc. And they won't drink Scotch because of the old peated thing. I don't like peated whiskey, so therefore I don't like Scotch.
Yep.
It's nonsense. We've discussed it in the past, but it just
Totally, yep.
so. But when that world is open to you, and
Yeah.
you see what's available in
Mm-hmm.
the world of Scotch, bourbon, Indian, Australian, African, world whiskies, and then you see what Ireland are charging for, as you said, there's some put out at 46%, somebody else's whiskey. Really, what have you done to it? Well, well, we looked after it, we nurtured it well. It's been in some nice wood.
All that marketing crap.
Yeah, exactly. So, but and they charge you the bloody earth for it. And I couldn't understand that we seem to be, or Irish distilleries seem to be really, really hiking those prices up for something that the equivalent in Scotch would be half, maybe a third that price.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a premiumization issue going on in Ireland whenever we're not selling a premium product in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's one of the things that I like, these sort of Lazarus brands that are coming back, and people maybe have no inclination of actually ever building a distillery.
Yeah.
So they're just gonna, source whiskey. Well, that's fine. I mean, people do that, whatever. But some of the pricing is absolutely nuts. Like, I mean, one of the last reviews I done on malt there, I mean, I've been highlighting pricing, and like, for example, not to pick on anybody in particular, but like Dublin Liberties
Mm-hmm.
are selling a 16-year-old, which is Bushmills Spirit,
Mm-hmm.
for €235 a bottle at 46%. And you're just like, guys, like, what is going on here? Like,
yeah.
235 quid, I'm into the realms of buying a bottle of Redbreast 21-year-old, a bottle of Redbreast 12 cask strength, and possibly a bottle of Lusty as well for the same money.
Yeah.
Like, it's just,
yeah.
that's, I don't know. I just, sometimes I just wonder.
And the sad thing is, people are paying it, and like, as Luna says here, Redbreast, and this is the thing, because I wanted to get on to Redbreast, because obviously the day they announced the latest Dream cask, and do we know anything about it, or is it all still just mystery until the 16th?
I haven't a clue about anything about it whatsoever. No, so it's just going to be mystery, and it'll be expensive.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you weren't a fan of the last Dream casks.
No, I mean, like,
well, say not a fan. I mean, I think it's one of those things. I often think that if you put it up against something else, as such.
Yeah, it's not that I'm not a fan. Like, I think this is one of the things as well. People have to get their head around with malt. There's our scoring system. Like with Causeway, what I had kind of done, I'd never really scored whiskies before. Mm-hmm. I don't like the 100-point thing, because I just think it's pointless. And like, how do you make the differentiation between a 94-point whiskey and a 95-point whiskey?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it you never see anything below 80? So yeah, I've never really been bothered with that. I suppose with Causeway, I started off and it was just kind of like, my rationale was, would I buy it again or would I not?
Mm-hmm.
And on that forum, I would always probably give people an option of, well, look, this is what it costs, this is what it's up against, and this is what I would either recommend or whatever. If I didn't like it, this is what I'd recommend you buy instead. The malt thing with the scores, I think what people have to realize is that, even a 3 and 4 on malt is like a drinkable whiskey. It just has faults that are quite glaring. A 5 is actually, it's still a good whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I give the Dreamcast 20 a 5. It's not that it's not a good whiskey. I mean, it is a good whiskey. It's just €380 for 50 CL.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I watered it down, I got a fairly similar experience from the Lusty.
Yeah.
Which is 45 quid. So,
Agreed.
And I'm sort of like, well, I gave the Lusty a 6.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really give the DC 20.
No.
It's like, what, 6 times the price, 7 times the price. So that had to be taken into account. I mean, so I suppose that's the thing is, I mean, sometimes people jump up on down a wee bit about, oh, you only give it a 5, you only give it a 6. Like a 6 is a really solid whiskey. It's like something like go and buy it, enjoy it. It's only whenever you start getting into 8s, 9s, and 10s on malt that they become a very rarefied event.
It's funny because scoring raised its head with me recently to the point where I no longer do it.
Right. Okay.
For the simple fact that it wasn't that I didn't have I had in my head, and everybody has their own way of doing it, know, and it's sort of, but when somebody questioned it, I thought he's got a fair point. I don't, because it sort of looked from where I was coming that everything was good, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
So what was poor to me was still showing as good, pretty much, to the unsuspecting. So it made sense for me to just stop scoring completely. Until now, at some point, maybe if I do come up with a better way of evaluating these things, then I'll do so. But just at the minute, I'm quite happy to not. What I've actually started doing is comparing which is working better for me. Because especially like I took the likes of the Yellow Spot and said, look, buy a red breast because the red breast 12. Okay, they're slightly different, but they're the likes of the red breast 12 is more accessible, and you'll get as nearly as much punch for your pound as such,
Yeah, like when Yellow Spot, it's to me it's a dessert whiskey. It's
that's the Malaga.
Yeah, it's kind of bearing on the like overly sweet kind of for me.
I like it. I do like that.
Right.
Totally.
Whereas I do think the red breast 12 is probably a bit better balanced,
Mm-hmm. Anyway, sorry, I've moved on, and I have a Tyrconnell in the glass.
Oh, okay.
Just for the craic.
Right. Well, I'll join you.
Haven't had it in ages.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty solid, I think. This is one that I gave the 5 out of 10 in malt. I think it's a perfectly solid Irish whiskey. It's not going to blow your socks off, but it's easy.
I have to be very careful with what I say about it because I did a blind. I gave myself a blind challenge. 5 Irish whiskies at one point. One of them was the Bushmills 12 Distillery Reserve, and the other one was Tyrconnell. And I'd already said, now I got 3 out of the 5 right, but the 2 I got wrong was the Bushmills 12 and the Tyrconnell. And I had said prior to that I liked Tyrconnell. So how the blind challenge can make a fool out of them.
Well, this is it. I mean, like, does it? I mean, at the end of the day, you're just giving your opinion of something there and then, and I mean, part of the thing about blind tasting is it takes away all your prejudices and prior things that you've built up in your head about a certain brand, possibly. I mean, that's one of the things even about like doing stuff for malt. I mean, I will put my hand on my heart and say that, like, I am a red breast fanboy in the sense that, like, red breast 12 to me is like just a superb whiskey. I mean, I gave a 10 out of 10 for the 21-year-old, but at the same time, I still like to think that although I appreciate the brand and I appreciate like the whiskey that they make, that I have shown with things like doing the Lustow, doing the DC20, that I'm also fairly like level-headed about like, okay, I like the brand, but I'm not just going to say, yay, this is like super stuff every time they release something, because it's not every distillery gets it right every time.
I yet again, totally honest, I really jump on board with the Lustow. I would actually lean in it quicker now than the 12-year-old.
Well, there you go.
Unfortunately, so does my wife.
That's always a shame.
It's just one of these ones. I turned around one day and the bottle was nearly drained. What the hell happened there?
But I mean, that's the great thing about whiskey, though, isn't it? I mean, like, at the end of the day, we all have different palates. We all have different noses. We all have different opinions. And I mean, one of the strengths that I think that malt has is the variety of writers, because you can then kind of align yourself with people that maybe share a similar palate to you. I mean, like it's quite funny what goes on sometimes in the background with malt and all the rest of it. Because I mean, we don't agree with each other at all times. You know, I mean, it's quite interesting.
Well, I didn't want to say it, but the Springbank thing keeps coming up, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you know, like, I mean, Springbank to me was, I mean, that was. I remember whenever Jason told me what it was. I mean, I just burst out laughing straight away because it was just like, well, this is going to unleash all amounts of hell. And but I mean, like, I totally stand by it. I mean, like,
no, and I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
In that you stand by it. I do like Springbank, but I mean, this is the thing. If you've got something, there's just something you don't like, be honest about it. This is, you know, as we said.
And the interesting thing about Springbank is, like, I've never particularly enjoyed the 18.
Mm-hmm.
The 15, I've had good ones. I've had terrible ones like that one. Which, I mean, no matter what people say, it was so aggressively spicy and peppery that it just took away from me. Jason can argue all he wants, I don't care. But I just don't like it in that particular release.
Yeah.
And I have quite a number of Springbanks in my collection there. Like, I think the 9-year-old Local Barley was released as a cracker.
Mm-hmm.
I have last year's 12-year-old Cask Strength, which I'm really middling about. I just can't seem to warm to it whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
I've always...
which one was that?
The 12-year-old
Cask. Which one was it? Can you remember? Batch?
Oh, I'm not sure. It was maybe the 2018 actually, or maybe the 2019. But it's 57.
Because I have the one that was 50-50 maturation. I had the one 50-50 maturation, and it did nothing for me. I think
that might be the one I have as a 50-50 maturation.
Yeah, and it just, to me, as I actually put it to Roy, sorry, we'll get completely off the plot here, but we'll get back to it. It was too balanced for me. It needed to sway one way or the other to excite me.
It's a bit nondescript, I think, actually. It's a bit too safe for a Springbank, nearly.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, I've always kind of liked the 10-year-old. I think it's just very young and vibrant. And maybe it's the fact that it's more spirit-driven that I like the 10-year-old.
You see, it's the 10 that I'll always turn back to every time.
And I'm a big fan of Long Row. I mean, I just love the normal Long Row.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I think the thing that saddened me about the Springbank review more than anything was, I mean, I'm well used to taking heat now for my reviews. I'm quite used to that, so that's water off a duck's back.
You're taking the heat before the review even comes out, mate.
But nobody mentioned Justine's review in the comments.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I actually think the piece worked well because it showed that you don't have to agree about whiskey. You know, Justine liked it. She gave it a 7.
Mm-hmm.
And she was pretty positive about it. Nobody mentioned her review in the comments. And that actually really, really saddened me because I thought, well, here, like, you know, there's somebody there that actually did like it, is positive.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read malt often enough, maybe you can align to Justine's palate or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's strange.
Yeah, no, well, yet again, as you said, and I actually brought this up in something the other week. I can't even remember what it was. And it was my last, I think it was either my last live stream or the one prior to that. But one of the people that kicked me off in the whiskey world, and it was because of something that you just said there, was Paul O'Hare from the Duke of York in Belfast.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And Paul said to me very early on, it's because you're never wrong in whiskey. And this was the bit that I loved. I thought this is great because I've been wrong about everything before. And, you know, and he says, because your opinion's your opinion, and people can argue with it, but they can't, you know, they can't make you change your mind over it. So
no, and that's the whole thing is, I mean, like, nobody on malt, and I can wholeheartedly say this, I mean, like, Twitter is an interesting place. It's like the total wild west of social media. Like, nobody on malt views themselves as being like the authority on whiskey, that what we say goes. We are just given opinion pieces.
Yeah.
And, you know, there are things that we see in whiskey and in the industry that maybe we want to call out. Maybe there's things we want to celebrate, whatever it is. But I mean, that'll be whatever the angle is we're coming from for that particular piece. but some people just cannot seem to like take critique or accept that you want to be doing a critique. And I mean, the one thing we are all on the same page on malt is that we hate the everything is awesome mentality. You know,
Yeah.
this whole thing of like, oh, you know, like Glenfiddich just released a 15-year-old today, and it's bound to be magic, is it? You know, so like, I mean, some of the stuff that I've seen written about malt on Twitter is just, I mean, it's hilarious. Like, I mean, it is just blows my mind, and like some of the aggression and just utter bile that is like thrown our way is unbelievable. But
do the distilleries themselves ever feel attacked? Feel like as if they've? Maybe I'm just being nosy now, but
well, yeah, I suppose maybe they do. I suppose the biggest response I've ever had from a distillery was really Sleeve League after I'd done the piece about the Silky, and I gave them a 2 out of 10. And
yes, that one, yeah.
I sort of called them out on maybe unfairly in the sense that like you know, they were just taking advantage of whatever the labelling laws are in Ireland that they can put on that they have a distillery whenever at the minute they have a gin distillery, and not quite the same thing, I suppose. I mean, the whiskey I just didn't like, plain and simple. So I mean, on Twitter, I mean, James came back to me and was just like, you know, and he was very nice about it. He just sort of said, look, I beg to differ, you know, which is fair enough. We had a chat at Whiskey Live, and you know, it was kind of hoping that I might be able to do something to get rid of the review online.
I think I read that actually.
Sort of like, you know, editorially, that's just never going to happen. Like, you know, where would we stand if we were to do things like that? But you know, interestingly, like at Whiskey Live, Sleeve League have now changed that blend. It's now 46%. It's natural color. It's non-chill filters. They have actually changed the components, and as he told me the other night, he's changed it twice. This is like the 3rd iteration of it. They now have a peated sulky coming out as well, where it is out. So I mean, I've actually bought both those bottles. I bought them last night because I was like, well, do you know what? I'm going to review them and see how they've come along.
Aye.
Because I just think that's the fair thing to do. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
I mean, first impressions whenever I tried the dark sulky at Whiskey Live, I was more than impressed. Like, I thought it was a big step up over what they had released previously. So, so I know, like, probably sometimes maybe the reviews that we have on malt and things, you know, it's a difficult one because you want to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm never going to stop being honest. That's the whole thing. I'll never stop being honest. But that probably affects some of the smaller guys more than it will the likes of Jameson, because or Bushmills. What do they care? Because they have like multi-million-pound sales over in America and stuff like that, you know. But I mean, you have to live and die by the product you're putting out.
Well, what I was just going to say to you there is, I mean, it's not, you know, don't fix the reviewer, don't amend the review, fix the whiskey, and then you know, this is the thing. If you fix the whiskey, then those who come afterward will enjoy it as well. Sorry, I'm gonna. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's it. Yeah, go
ahead. What I was going to say there, I just want to check in just on the chat here and see. There was a few guys joined earlier on. Norn Iron joined. David Owen joined. I just want to say hello to them all. Make sure that they're all keeping well. Tim from Donner Pass has just landed in. Very good to see you. I seen
Graham Horner put an interesting question in there earlier on. Actually, I'm just going to scroll back and see if I can find it again. That was something to do about people making gin. How did we feel about it?
How do we feel about it?
About Ashlandville and things like that.
Because
what's your thoughts on the likes of Ashlandville and Copeland, mainly gin makers, jumping into the whiskey world? Personally, like, you know, I have absolutely no issue with that. I mean, that's how Dingle started off as well. Before they released their whiskey, was making vodka and making gin. And actually, Dingle gin and Dingle vodka are both very good. Not drinks that I would choose to ordinarily drink, but they're pretty good. At the end of the day, starting a distillery is no small feat.
Nope.
I mean, you look at Killowen, they conservatively estimated to get going cost £5 million. So at the end of the day, these guys, they need to have some sort of revenue stream coming in before they release the whiskey. So I have pretty much no issue with them doing that whatsoever.
What concerns me, and yeah, again, I was chatting with Paul O'Kane from Belfast Whiskey Club about this, is there's many distilleries now, 30 something odd, and at a time there, 3 of those 30 odd were making all the new make, I suppose. So everybody's just sharing it around. How do these 30 something distilleries, what do they do with their whiskey once it's their own whiskey? How? Because they've been working off somebody else's distillate, somebody else's new make spirit for a while, just to get caught up, which is understandable. They're selling their gin, they're selling somebody else's, and at some point there's a point where their bottling goes from, this isn't their new make spirit, this is our new make spirit now. So there's got to be flavor profile changes that'll bleed through.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. That, I mean, last May I was down in Galway and met up with a whole load of other guys like Omar, that's Dram Good, and Ivor, who's at Whiskey Talk to You and stuff on Twitter, Instagram. And me and Ivor were having a fairly in-depth discussion about this, about teeling.
Who are already in the process of doing that, I suppose.
Yeah. So they are, in the sense that they've put out a pot still, but they haven't put out their own malt yet.
No, they're still, because it's their own grain now, isn't it? But they're still, So Ivor was sort of asking me, like, his thing was, well, what's the harm and what's teeling doing, like building this brand based on Bushmills and Killie stock that they are then further maturing in Sauterne or rum or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, because people will buy into this brand where they're basically drinking Killie and Bushmills that has been treated a certain way. So that's the flavour profile they're expecting. So whenever Teeling actually come to release their own whiskey, if it doesn't follow that flavour profile, where do your fans go?
And that's the inherent danger for these guys, like, because a lot of companies are not being open and honest about where they're getting the stock, then that's the problem they're going to have going forward.
It's the casual whiskey drinker, isn't it, that will technically, I mean, we know, and I know that where most of these spirits come from, and most of the people, I would think, in here know where most of these spirits come from. I mean, because right now we're drinking Tyrconnell, we're drinking Cully.
Yeah.
And it's quite funny, actually, because I didn't want to say that this tastes totally different from the last time I remember it. I remember it being very floral and very Cully, I always consider Cully to be quite floral and all that there. Yeah. And this, to me, tonight doesn't, for some reason. I'm beginning to wonder whether the cork got a bit funny.
No, I mean, what I said in the review about the Tyrconnell is that, and it happens every time I have it, is I think the nose is wonderful. It's a lovely honeysuckle thing. There is a bit of floral going on. It's quite malt driven, and then you taste it and you're like, what the hell went wrong? The palate just doesn't marry up to the nose.
Translate it.
No, it doesn't, and that's its shortfall,
Yeah, but yet again, as I say, there's another Kilbeggan's, another one of those ones which are closer to that tipping point, where. And I just wonder where all these distilleries are going to go. And so I have to, just so as it gets shown up once.
well, to be fair, Jimmy, like, we can't have Michael Coleman being the only guy that wears terrible shirts. Do you know what I mean? So somebody else has to do it.
That's actually quite calm for you there, Phil. But no, I think that it will be strange and interesting times.
Yeah, and I think like going forward, I was worried for a lot of distilleries starting up before what has happened with like the coronavirus thing. I think now we're coming into like a whole new economic reality that's gonna it's gonna wipe out a lot of these guys before they possibly even start it.
Well, it's going to change everything.
And like one of the big things actually that I suppose from chatting to people behind the scenes really, I mean it's all well and good having like for example with the likes of Hinch at the start, I was kind of like, why are they releasing like whiskey that isn't their own? They're sourcing, and they're not hiding. I mean, they're quite open. Michael Morris is totally open about the fact this is a source whiskey, blah blah blah. But whenever the distillery is complete, that they are going to be basically trying to replicate that or make it better. The spirit. So that's fine. But I mean, the simple answer came down to if they didn't get like global distribution before they actually made their own spirit, they weren't going to survive.
Yeah.
And they're not even they're not small fry in any way. I mean, they're putting 15 million quid into the distillery. You know what I mean? So there's pretty big sums going on here. So I kind of think there's a lot of these other guys that are, and it's very credible, and it's we want to applaud them for like we're not going to release a whiskey until it's our own, it's matured and it's 3 years old or whatever, going down the whole dingle route. But they just might not survive because
unless there's an unlimited pot of money at the back of it.
Yeah, and the thing, and in a lot of cases there won't be. And the thing about it is that the Irish market is not going to be big enough to sustain these people. I mean, they're going to have.
It just hit a bad time, and all these distilleries were on the up, and it was just going to keep going and going and going. And every week, as I put it one week there, for every new Highland Park whiskey came out, there was an Irish distillery opened.
And probably with the same amount of dodgy marketing that was going on.
And it just, as I say, unfortunately now all this is hit just at this time because I mean, do we know? Well, Jamie's in here. Do we know the latest on Hinch? Because surely was it not meant to open this month? And
I'm not sure what's happening. I'm sure it'll definitely open.
Yeah, no, but it's just how you get the whiskey out there,
Yeah.
Because actually, somebody in Instagram earlier asked me about Hinch, what I thought of the Hinch, and I'm not going to say anything on here because I've nothing in front of me to. I wasn't overly foul about it, but I wasn't. No, because I mean, I do like the small batch, like the 5-year-old. But as I said to him, he says, have you heard anything about the new make? What can we expect? And all this here. And I says, we're like the rest of us. We're just going to have to sit in our hands and wait.
What's that? Exactly.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. What's that?
So, right, let's move on.
Okay.
Talking of new distilleries. Killowen. Down there in County Down. That's the one. You have it. I don't. That's the very one too. It is the Txakolina, which is it's a Basque white wine.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep. And sparkling white wine. And you were saying to me earlier that it's right. That one's aged.
So this is.
I break that one down again, Phil, because there was so much going on it.
So one of the things that I like about Killowen, Brendan Carty, who's the distiller down there, is very open and transparent about everything they do. And I mean, this is like basically the smallest distillery in Ireland at the minute. Like Brendan makes something like about a barrel and a half of whiskey a week. It's
it's pretty much a shed, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty much. So again, when he realized as well to get a bit of income, he was going to have to go down, release a whiskey that isn't his, but he's very open and honest about it on the back here. So on the back of the label, it tells you the approximate blend guide. So it was 75% 2009 grain Irish whiskey, and 2008 Malt Irish Whiskey that were distilled in County Louth, so Cooley. And then we have a 20% 2008 Malt Irish Whiskey that was from Northern Ireland, so
Bushmills.
yeah, Bushmills. So 10-year-old malt from Bushmills, or 12-year-old malt from Bushmills. So anyway, the Cooley stuff then was initially matured in bourbon. Then it was blended and aged in sherry casks after that. Then the Bushmills came along that was also in bourbon cask. All that was fired together with the Cooley stuff, and then it was finished in the Txakolina cask, which also has acacia heads.
I hope somebody was writing all that down.
Yeah.
Sorry, just one wee second before we move on further. This is Jamie from Hinch Distillery that we were discussing a moment ago. And the plan is power ahead. Now, he did say a moment ago here that the distillery is about 3 months behind, but it's good to know that they're still going ahead.
Yeah.
And it's, it'll happen. This is really opened up now for me, because I well, it's like everything, you pour it in your glass. It's been sitting in a sample bottle.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of air getting about there. So now that this is sat in the glass for a moment, it's I like the nose on that. Now, what I did notice, and I think Whiskey Graham might still be in here. You might disagree with me completely here, Phil, but the first thing I noticed whenever I put my nose back into it was there's almost a bourbon hint off it for me.
Yeah. Well.
But then when I go back in,
real sweetness to it. I mean, what I found actually, what you were saying, whenever I first poured it, I found it actually quite a closed nose.
Yeah, like very much so.
But it really has opened out. So,
it's quite earthy too, in that there's a fresh, I don't know, to me I'm getting like a fresh grass or something about it.
Well, I'll tell you what I was getting from it. So I was kind of getting like stone fruit, but kind of unripe stone fruit, so kind of like peach and apricot. And maybe like I can definitely get a bit of white grape on it.
Yeah.
And then I was actually getting like chamomile tea.
Yeah, there's something in there.
And a wee bit of like, this is maybe the earthiness, but I actually get a bit of talcum powder off it.
Well, I was actually about to say there's a slightly
like minerally thing.
I was going to say a perfume note, but it's you're saying talc, and I would agree with you that there's somewhere in between that. It's a Killowen almost. It's a
I know what you mean. But I mean that's probably the grain element of it coming through there. It's also kind of buttery. Like there's a butteriness to it.
There is, but it's not like, I definitely wouldn't suggest it's like any other Irish whiskey because there's so many parts, so many things at play here.
Yeah.
And I do like the fact that these guys, I mean, this was 490 bottles of this, and they're only the half bottle, aren't they?
Yeah, it's 50 cl, so it's 55.75%. I have bottle 99.
And it's 10-year-old, as I say, but you said it's only a finish in that Txakolina.
Yeah, so I don't know how long the finish is in the Txakolina cask. Like I was saying to you earlier on, I'm not au fait enough with the acacia stuff to.
No, this is it.
To know what the acacia is really like. I know Brendan had said that he reckoned that the acacia brings like a bit of like fruitiness, more fruitiness. Whereas he reckons the Txakolina brings like this dryness.
It's weird.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, it cost me £80 for a half liter.
It's funny you said about dryness, because people, and I've heard this and we know this, but it's not something that I mention very often. And there's those that might laugh, especially with a conch like mine. but nose feel. And you said about it being dry,
Mm.
and even in the nose, it's dry. But
Yep.
then that is the white. That was maybe their white wine.
Yep.
Effect,
Well, there's definitely a dry spiciness to it as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a struggle because I've tried this beside the rum cask, which was their first release.
Uh-huh.
And it took me a while, but eventually you can kind of get a wee bit of the sherry thing where you kind of get a bit of raisininess, but it's definitely like the sherry bit's not. It's there, but it's hard to pick out.
Mm-hmm. Right, I'm going to taste this because it's just been torturing me. Ooh. Oh, that is interesting. It's good, interesting. But
Well,
it's totally different from anything I've tried.
So that answer Luna Iron has asked is the Basque White a dry one?
It's a sweet wine, is it not?
No, apparently it is quite a dry
sparkling
wine, so it's kind of quite lemony. And I mean, I haven't tried it. I mean, it's one of these things now. I'm sort of going. I need to go and buy a bottle of this now to go and see what it's like, really. Apparently it's quite earthy, quite minerally, and has a kind of lemon citrus zest thing going on.
You were saying earlier that it's big in the American market.
Yeah, apparently a lot of it goes to Northeast America. In fact, it's so popular that the guy who ships it over there has to do a ballot to sell bottles.
That's not because it's weird because there's a lot of volume at the start, and it's the usual thing that takes over and takes all the control, and you have to work your way around it. But there's a flavor in there that I can't put my finger on that I've never tasted in another whiskey.
Well, like what I'm getting from this, I mean, if Brendan is stupid enough to watch this, he's probably I mean this from my point of view because he's probably not going to appreciate me for this. Like I'm not finding that as fruity on the palate as it was on the nose.
I would yeah.
Like the palate to me is not balancing up. Like to me the nose is lovely.
Well, I'll be told, I actually disagree with you there. I find the nose quite dry and a bit spirit driven, and the palate is because that I still like a big. I mean, I like mouth-watering whiskey, which this for someone that's so dry in the nose, this is. I find it quite mouth-watering, and I like that. And it's just
see, I actually kind of find this quite strangely. I find this kind of waxy and minerally.
I totally agree with you there. It is waxy.
And then I'm getting like a lot of pepper, a lot of clove, tobacco kind of leaf.
That's maybe what it is.
I mean, initially I'm getting like a lemon sherbet thing, like it's really zesty initially.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of I think possibly, to me, I think the Txakolina cask has maybe overpowered everything. And that it sort of is quite zesty at the start, and then it becomes like, to me, it's actually quite mouth puckering. Like it's that dry that I'm kind of like going, like I'm salivating because my mouth's dry, rather than it being moreish, if you know what I mean.
No, I quite like that. I must say I do quite like that. Now, the more I get into it, it starts to just get hot.
And that's what I mean is those pepper notes and the clove oil and things like that start to build.
Yep.
So, being perfectly honest, for me, because I've been able to try this compared to the rum.
Yeah.
So for me, the rum was an undeniable success because I think the rum cask, lent itself to just layering more tropical fruit on top
Mm-hmm.
of something that kind of already had that, like peach and mango and guava and stuff.
Yeah.
And then the rum cask, you were getting more vanilla, you were getting more coconut and things, and so it's like a dangerously drinkable whiskey. This, for me, on the other hand, I think is a bit more challenging. I'm not saying that it's a terrible whiskey or anything, it's just more challenging. I think maybe as the bottle level goes down, maybe it'll open up a bit more and it'll give more.
There's a lot of strange things going on. As I say, I'm tasting things in there that I've just never, I'm going to say I've never tasted them in other whiskies. I don't think I've ever tasted them together before.
Yeah.
There's things going on that just, that work for me in certain places.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing for me, that possibly it's an amalgamation of flavors that don't necessarily work that well together.
Mm-hmm. It's weird. I've added water to that, and it's gone drier. Again,
right.
Now that being said, it's I think the perfume thing is even.
Actually, see, whenever you add water, it just brings out the grain, and like there's so much grain, like youthful grain now, that it's kind of, you're getting that real perfume note.
Now Luna Aron's asked the question which I can't answer because I've never had Vino Verde.
Wrong person to ask as well, because I'm not a wine geek in any sense.
No.
If you had Adam from Malt Review on here, I'm sure he would give you quite definitive answers on this.
So I asked the wrong person in here.
Yeah, the wrong person. So there's Rose from Where I Dram has said that she thinks it's very interesting how each person can perceive the same whiskey so differently. Totally, like, but that's the whole crack, isn't it?
Yep.
You know?
And I mean, I certainly, I get the impression too at times that there's those would say, you're 100% right. That's incredibly dry.
And
that's, since I put the water into it, all that mouth-watering thing it did, as just all it's done is just made it a really, really dry whiskey. That's incredibly dry.
The weird thing with the water is I'm getting more spice now, like that more pepper heat.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, this is the thing that I used to think, I thought very early on, I'm sure there's other people who do, that you can be led, but I actually like that, because there's sometimes I am really, really struggling to find something, and all it takes is one person to say, but do you not get such and such?
Yeah.
And I go, yeah, that's what it is. I'm going to get that one, then it'll send me off in a different direction to knowing something else, and and it can go. I sort of laugh at it from the very top, where Charlie McLean was on with Roy Aquaviti a few weeks back, and he did a drama along with Charlie.
Yeah.
Pardon me, and I was one of the ones that was lucky enough to get a lot of these samples off Roy to try along with Charlie.
Yeah.
And I pretty much disagreed with everything he was saying about these drams. It was just, and I thought to myself, am I broken? What's wrong here? But I was reading things that people were saying in the chat, who other people that got these drams.
Yeah.
And they were the ones that were saying a lot of the things that I had picked up on, and I just thought to myself, well, no, everybody's different. So
yeah, totally, that's it. And I mean, it's one of the things. Like, I mean, I have a wee bottle club with 6 other mates, and we get 100 mils each of whatever bottles we buy and all the rest of it, and we'll have a wee chat over like WhatsApp and stuff about them. And I mean, it's so interesting just to see where people come from, and the divergence of opinion, of palates, and as you said, like at the end of the day, like what Paul Hare said to you was totally on the money. Like, you're never wrong. Like, it's your palate, and I'm not gonna, like, I won't disagree with you. Like, I mean, if that's what you get, that's what you get. If you like whiskey, who am I to tell you that, like, you're wrong?
Well, here, and it's actually happened to me in the past where I have said, "Am I getting such and such?" And someone has went, "No." And I thought, "You're an arsehole." It's amazing how quick you can go off a person. Like,
That's it. You know, I mean, for every decent person like me, you get someone like Jamie. You
I hope he's still here.
know?
But no, it's all good. And I mean, yes. Sorry, we're getting on. I generally try to wrap these up after about an hour, but I did think this would go on a while. But no, that has gone far too dry for me. I like it. I liked it without before I added the water. It just got so that is what I would consider astringent and just nice. But
Yeah.
But Irish whiskey is in as I put it to somebody recently, it's in a state of flux.
Yeah. I see Jamie's sitting blacklisted now.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you know.
Yeah, you look like somebody that cares, Phil.
Looks like Hinch is never making it on malt. Oh well.
But no, it is. It's strange times, and I mean, I always look at it and think, well, say always, but certainly at the minute, I'm looking at it and going, well, look, maybe we should reassess Irish whiskey 10 years from now. To me,
But it has to be that way. It has to be that way, though, Jim. Like at the end of the day, I think even like with Dingle and Teeling releasing their pot still at young ages, where actually they probably shouldn't have.
Yeah. See, yet again, this is something I find a bit independent. And it's not something. It's not really something that I wanted to get into here, but it's just something I find quite funny. Is independent bottlers again, and they go, and you get somebody that goes that right, the time's right, bottle it, and there's potentially 600 odd bottles that could be rubbish because one person really enjoyed them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they may never find a market because people are just like, what was that? You know what I mean? I've just wasted 75 quid or whatever it is. Yeah. Totally.
But anyway, sorry, that was that yet again. That was just something I wanted to pop in there. No, Phil, look, I can't thank you enough for doing this tonight, mate. You're the first guest I've had on here, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'll be totally honest with you. The reason I asked you to do it was because you're local to me.
I just appreciate it.
We think alike, sort of.
Yeah.
You know an awful lot more about whiskey than I do, but
not necessarily.
I can tell you for a fact you do, but it's just more the fact, as I say, that we speak each other's language as such, that's
totally.
And as I say, things are happening here this year. As you know, the Belfast Whiskey Week, which I know you're playing a part in as well, it will go ahead in its own way, and we'll have Paul from the Belfast Whiskey Club, pardon me, hopefully on here at some point before all that happens. But for now, thank you, mate.
No, I appreciate it. I actually feel quite privileged to be your first guest on your show. So,
and hopefully it'll not be the last time you're on.
No, definitely not. We'll definitely do it again.
We'll bring you back 10 years and discuss the Irish whiskey city.
Even more.
But here, do me a favor, hang around.
Oh, will do.
And I'm going to wrap this up, and I'll speak to you again in a minute.
No problem, that'll do. Cheers, Roy. Jim, thank you very much.
I wish.
All the best, Jim.
See you later. Thanks, Phil. Yes, thank you very much to Phil for that. I can't thank him enough. I really appreciate everything that he did for me there. As I say, he's my first guest. Thank you all for being in here. Yet again, it's been a laugh. It's been good to have it's been good to have you all here. Luna, I know, but Mrs. Novice it requires my assistance with the watching of the television at this time of the night as well. So it's been great crack. I will be back in 2 weeks' time, and I will have another guest. And this one, now that you know Phil, you say you don't know Phil, but you know him now. But the next guest I will have, you will know. You'll know him well. That's all I'll say about that. Listen, yet again, thank you very, very much for being here. It has been an absolute pleasure tonight. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. We've learned some things. I've certainly learned some things. I'm looking forward to getting back into this Bushmills that Greg sent me. And I'll just say, here's to your good health. Look after yourselves. Cheers.